Good afternoon, Brian. How are you doing?
You're doing good.
That's excellent to hear. So, I've actually invited you on so I could speak to lovely guests like you yourself, that we can talk about discussions that are usually not spoken of really publicly. And I would like to do it in a free manner, in a free space as well, where we can feel comfortable talking about these discussions. And there's three things I want to be talking about today. So the first thing is modern day values. The second thing is difficulties of modern day world. And lastly, how to overcome and discuss things one at a time. So we can do that one at a time, obviously. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, I feel like there's a fundamental problem of ethics and the crux of the theory of moral conduct. So how we should behave, how to be good, how to be powerful, how to be aware, how to be self-controlled. So before I ask you how to be all those things, what is justice in your sense, in your definition? How would you view justice?
Well, justice stands at the top of the Old Bailey, I think, with scales held in each arm. So I suppose the courts are supposed to deliver justice. However, we're starting on that rudimentary point. Well, we get to a situation these days whereby clearly justice isn't done. You only have to look at how the rich can afford expensive teams of lawyers and can get a different result to what somebody else would get had they not had the funds. So, just starting off on the basics, I'm not really sure whether even the court system these days delivers fair justice.
Do you think that's because everything has to be formatted into like a political sense, and not everything actually is in a political sense?
Well, just quite on a simple money versus money.
So it's just money privilege. Yeah.
You can afford a massive team of lawyers, or you're trying to get legal aid, which you may not get for a simple case, then the justice system is more in your favour.
Even if you were in a wrong, or even if you were in a right, it wouldn't have to matter, as long as you've got the backing.
Listen, Prince Andrew just paid £12 million to get off with something somebody else who didn't have £12 million would go to jail.
Yes.
I mean, that's happened within the last few weeks, as far as I can see.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
You might argue that, well, Weinstein didn't get away with it despite his massive team of lawyers, but I think he did, to some extent, have such a long rep going back so far, and the amount of information against him was difficult to find, however big his team of lawyers were. The first time Epstein got away with a sweetheart deal based on his power and influence.
Yeah.
Based on the lawyers, the legal team he had.
When you say power,
it's power and money. Money is power.
So another question I've got with justice is: shall we seek righteousness or shall we seek power, or is it better to be good or strong in a sense? Because in how we conduct ourselves as individuals, because that's where they've gotten to their heights, being whatever they've had with those attributes. Shall we not do the same in a very mischievous way, but to be able to progress in our lives in a sense where we don't have to do any wrongdoings, but as well be good at the same time and do it in a very effective way, where we don't have to hurt anyone, or don't have to be wrong or do wrong to anyone, in a sense.
Okay, well, I think what you're talking about is ethics and morals.
Yeah.
Justice.
Yeah.
Justice should. So when you go to a criminal court, it should be independent, regardless of your privileged position or non-privileged position, regardless of your bank account, regardless of your political affiliations. It should be completely independent and fair for everyone that comes into that court.
Yeah.
My problem is that these days It's become distorted through the fact that you can just hire massive teams of lawyers to try and get you the best deal.
Okay.
So that's justice. If you're talking about ethics or morality, well, that becomes even more distorted because people that tend to chase, who disregard ethics, disregard morality, tend, in all honesty, from my experience, tend to go up a career ladder much more, vigorously, put it that way. They are more, if you don't care whose feelings you hurt, if you don't conduct yourself
In a morally manner.
Excellent. If you don't mind hurting people, offending people, showing them disrespect, and your obsession is with position of power, then many often, you will see. Now, it doesn't matter whether that's within a small conglomerate or an office or politics. Certain types of characteristics.
Narcissists, basically. Yeah. So, with that view, would you say that the New World Order, pushes the way through to narcissism? It has an epistemic bias towards narcissism. The New World Order.
Narcissistic psychopaths have always, in that sense, had an advantage. If you think that being around a human being comfortable with yourself, if that's what makes you happy, to be in a position of power and authority, where you can determine other people's careers or future, or
through conformism, and all other sorts of tactics, manipulation tactics and whatnot.
Exactly. Well, that's what narcissistic psychopaths are all about. Really, they only think about themselves and put everyone else is irrelevant.
Would you agree with this statement here, where the truth is that a desperado and a man who sets some value on his life do not meet on even terms?
Absolutely.
And would you say a desperado could, if we put this in this case, in this scenario, would we say that could be analyzed as desperado as a narcissist and say that he does not put any values onto his life?
Well, I think a desperado or a narcissistic psychopath with a big ego, which are generally the types of people that in modern day society do excel. And I think that, in a way, is because there are less ethics as time goes on. I think my father's generation were very moral, very ethical, and they had integrity. And that seems to be a value.
Integrity is a very big thing. Yeah.
Whole, to mean round. This word in itself, that used to be what, just certainly as a man, and I would suspect as a woman, that was an important measurement, characteristic that the average human would be striving for. But that seems to be expendable these days in favour of a more selfish, brutal, cutthroat, egotistical.
It's causing a clash of independence and subjective wills against one another, and the most powerful will itself, establishing itself, is authoritarian. So that person becomes this. It falls into this ego drama, and it's the center of everything. And this person thinks that there's that everyone should be relative to each other. So he falls into relativism, and there's no absolute right or wrong. So he just does whatever he wants because there's no absolute or objective truth. And people seem to dismiss and find that attractive, in a sense, that whole behavior.
Well, I mean, you went through a lot of answers there, but I think once you strip the human race of the need, if you like, or the will to try and essentially just be a decent, moral human being that treats people equally with respect and without a power trip, without manipulation. Once that is no longer a recommended, not recommended, it's no longer a valued quality or characteristic. It seems to have been fallen by the wayside because people without those models appear to, within today's society,
It's
seem to excel. But the question is whether you want to choose that. I mean, I think it's easy once you're in some sort of relative position of power to start abusing that power and climb on people to gain power and money. But whether you can actually sleep at night is fairly important to me.
Surely someone living that lifestyle would have to recognize they're living that lifestyle. That they...
You would think that it would make them feel guilty, that the fact that they feel comfortable in themselves and not guilty would imply that it has now become socially acceptable to behave like that.
Yeah, but they allow it to happen instead because I find it, well, not me personally, but I feel like people find it attractive to say, hey, he's the bad guy, but yet we want to adore him, in a sense. Because there's no actual right or wrong, so they don't actually know if it's right or wrong in the end of the day, because there's no one telling them that, hey, he's deceiving, or hey, he's a narcissist, or hey, we should be aware of,
So why then, what did it used to be important to a previous generation, and why is it less important now? What is it that has changed over just a period of time that I can remember, whereby the behaviour that I think goes on within power and politics, and that, as I say, that can go on through companies or small companies, large companies, all work to politics.
My next question is finding reason, value, meaning. All of that, is there a lack of higher value? Or is there an unheard cry for meaning? Is that what's going on here?
I think some people get lured into chasing power and money and sort of have no resistance. I think modern media has definitely influenced them, whereby we get so-called role models that are absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
By large companies to be appalling almost.
I completely agree. Yeah. And the scariest thing is
the amount of advertising that goes on, whereby we're absolutely swamped by it these days. I think there's less and less room for people to actually spend time thinking and just thinking about, just thinking about what their relationships are to people. I mean, just not so long ago, just a few decades ago, you'd be sitting on a bus, and if you read the paper, or you wouldn't read the paper anymore, you'd just make a little hole in the window and take the mist away and watch the world go by. But at that time, you would be thinking about your relationships, or who you were going to meet, or what's the relationship like with that person. But you had almost time to philosophize. Whether that be, maybe that word is too massive for what most people were doing. But there was simply somewhere between daydreaming and philosophizing and trying to understand who they were, and what their role was, and how they behaved that day. Had there been an argument? What created it? Was it their own bad behavior?
Their thinking process.
People have time to really think about their actions and how they're responding, or relationships to others. We are just completely bombarded. From the moment we wake up to the moment we crash out, we don't give ourselves any space in our minds to really convalesce and think and draw conclusions.
And do you think it's because they tried to disrupt the moderation of our thinking process in a sense? Like you said, back in the day, you would have time to think about all these other things that genuinely nowadays people don't even come to think of that or have a thought of that, because all the perceiving that they're going through on a daily basis probably don't allow them to have the time to do so. Like if I walk around the main street and there's like 10 Gucci stores in the corner, like I can't really be thinking straight, let's be real, or advertising left and right if I'm on the train. It's very hard to not find that free time or that space that people need to actually think about relationships, how they've gone through their day, what they need to do, what they have done, what they can improve on. And that's just on a daily basis. We're not talking like on a long frame. That's just getting on with it.
I mean, I'm not saying that there's been a conscious effort to do that. That's just technology that comes along.
But has it disrupted it? Has it disrupted it? Would you say disrupt?
It's certainly disrupted, yeah. But I mean, you've almost. I don't think it's a coincidence that meditation has become more and more popular. It's becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
Than it's ever been. And I think it's because people just can't find the space in their lives or in their head. Because they become bombarded by too much information and almost desensitized.
Like Jordan Peterson once said, like voluntary acceptance and therefore the transcendence of suffering. So you literally have to put your mind into it and actually accept whatever you're doing, and then you'll find probably a sense of suffering, but that suffering is that responsibility of that effort, that action that you're doing, and you have to find pleasure in that effort itself in order to put time into something, to think in a moderate way, to just go by in a very slow, controlled manner, and not fall for all the advertising, not fall for all the, like basically everything that we're forced upon to see, and we have no control over it. And the scariest thing about it is what we see and what we perceive. First principles are things that you assume and usually move forward, right? Those are first principles. And when we see social media and when we see all this, we don't really have time to think about, is this right? Is this wrong? Should I be looking at this? Should I not be looking at this? Could I be doing something else better with my time? Could I be finding meaning, basically, finding value, finding reason, finding responsibility?
Social media certainly has its advantages as well. I mean, you are able to accelerate learning just in terms of access to literature or books or documentaries.
But that has to start with a why.
So it does have its advantage.
It has to start with a why though, Brian. Like if I tell one of my mates to go read a book or something, they'll read like one chapter and probably give up, or like they'll rather look at their phones or like scroll through social media or whatnot. They'll probably not want to spend too much time reading a book. And I think that's because the answer is in the why. It's lacking the why should I read this book. And once that one day when that why arises and everything begins to like ting with excitement, I think that needs to be pushed upon. That just can't come within. That has to be pushed upon. That has to be that has to be motivated into someone. That has to be told to someone, this is the right thing to do. Because that's what I needed, to be honest, from my personal experience. I needed someone to tell me, hey, you've got to read books, you've got to educate yourself, you've got to enjoy life as it is, you've got to put your values and meanings to places where it's not just abstract. It has concrete, physical, sentimental value to me. It's not just abstract thoughts, like again, spending more time with my family or spending time with the right people. It's not just, oh, what am I doing today? Or there's no plan, you know what I mean? There's no plan, there's no meaning, there's no value. I think a lot of people are living like that in a constant way.
Long before modern media arrived, there was a phrase that television was the opium for the masses. And I once knew a woman who should remain nameless, who literally watched every single soap opera on every channel during every night of the week. That was her hobby. So there's always been either people are interested in reading or growing or going to the theatre or being interested in the arts or being interested in something, playing an instrument. And some are not. Some just want to watch soap operas. Modern media that somehow renders everyone null and void.
But would you say soap operas have the same effect as social media? So this is a statement that my mate said. Social media has become our generation's chosen medium of determining our place in the hierarchy of social status, which negatively affects our personal ego. And I don't think soap opera has that same effect, or I would say damaging danger effect, compared to what social media can do, in a sense that modernity has been replaced. Because now it used to be watching TV and whatnot, but now you can pull up your phone and be on it for as long as you want, and you can put any show you want to watch. You're basically in control of what you perceive.
But at the end of the day, it's a pocket television, isn't it? So you can actually use your meter and look at a soap opera. You can look at. I don't know anyone who doesn't have Netflix these days.
I don't.
But it's really hard to find a good movie on Netflix. They are all in that new kind of mode, cheap production, bad acting, no great script, padded out with some songs, and a bit sentimental, and there goes another one. You can't even remember having watched it.
What it's called, yeah.
So even films, they seem to have been taken down to their lowest common denominator in terms of their creativity, in terms of their meaning. I mean, a good film should be like a good book. It should stay with you it should still be making you think days after you watched it.
Yeah.
It should be profound, you should grow, you should learn.
Mm-hmm.
But, I can remember, and it's not so long ago, in the 80s, whereby there would only be so many films out in any 1 month. Do you know what I mean? There would only be so many books out in any 1 month.
Yeah.
And so you always had somebody, if you were down the pub, somebody would say, "Have you seen that film?" And half the people around the table will have already watched it, and the other half are going next week. There was some sort of commonality. Same with books. Somebody said, "Oh, you read that book that just came out 2 months ago?" And again, there could be a conversation about a book. These days, there are so many books coming out, so many films coming out, that you can sit in a group of people and you say, "I watched a good movie the other day," and somebody says, "Well, what's that?" And you mention it, and around the table of 20 people, none of them are there.
Yeah.
And then it happens to the other 20 people. So there's less in common amongst people. But in addition, as I say, I don't think just because there are more books, there are more films, it doesn't mean to say that there's more great information. The films aren't any good.
Well, would you say that because they're trying to spit out all these movies and shows and all these different kinds of books at such a fast rate, does that affect the quality of these productions? Does it affect the quality of the art itself because they're trying to profit as fast as possible? I think, again, it's a money game. They're trying to profit as much as possible. The productions will make like maybe 10 films in 6 months or something. Or is it just...
They're trying to, some of these films now are just like a series, just like one episode out of a series. You know, it's cheap filming, it's bad acting, it's just cheap production. There's nothing really ground. I suppose when people used to go to the cinema, it was an occasion, and so you expected something on a larger, grander scale.
I think even the content.
There's a lot of them that is just rubbish. They're just thrown out on a massive production line to entertain the masses who clearly are not that demanding.
Yeah. I just watched Goodfellas the other day, and the thing about the quality of that film to what I would watch now is you can't even compare it. Goodfellas is one of the best movies in the world of all time, in my opinion. You know, when you got that first narrative voice, you got the third narrative voice, and you've got all these different characters, all these different meanings, and all the backgrounds, and it all fits perfectly. It has an actual story.
Different stories, different subplots.
Yeah.
well scripted, well filmed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and like it had an actual meaning. It was very real as well. It wasn't like one of those like you can't really relate to it. You could definitely relate to Goodfellas, whoever you are. And nowadays you can't really do that with any of the movies coming out, or even the shows or whatnot. Even music, like music is horrible. You can't relate to any music nowadays. In my opinion.
I don't want to sit here and just say, well, my generation were capable and creative, and we used to do great things, and now the young generation not. That wouldn't. I don't think that's fair.
It's not a good message.
No, and there's not. It's just not entirely true. Each generation is massively more intelligent than the last one by definition. That's how we grow.
Mm-hmm.
But how? I suppose that modern technology has also allowed us to actually start making films in a larger quantity and start banging them off and at very low cost.
Okay.
So maybe that's why it's just easier to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd like to move on to the next part. So the next part is male-female stigma or doxa. When I say stigma, I mean a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. And when I say doxa, it's opinions and acceptance. The first question under this is, are people constantly satisfied with knowing bare minimum? And why?
Well, I don't know how you can possibly say that across the board. It's because we just touched on that before.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the woman who she wasn't thick, by the way. This woman wasn't unintelligent, but that was her hobby, watching soaps. And she'd flip from one channel to the next and get every single soap throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't miss one. So, some people are inquisitive. Some people cannot be fulfilled unless they climb up Everest. Some people cannot be fulfilled unless they get a racing car and damn near kill themselves every second weekend.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about information?
Your own requirements.
What about knowing information though? Because like nowadays, information passes so fast and everything's short-handed information. And to think that if someone were to hear, let's say, a subject they hear a little bit about the subject on social media and they say, hey, okay, now I know everything about the subject and I'm going to spread the word about this information that I know so little of, like a Dunning-Kruger effect. And I think that's a negative impact on social media, but it can also be turned into a positive by educating people and saying, maybe spend a bit more time on whatever research or whatever topics that you are into, and then putting the effort to study it or be a master, be an expert on it or whatnot, in a sense. But being able to satisfy yourself by knowing the bare minimum is very dangerous because you're only reaching the tip of the iceberg. You don't know what's under. You don't know how much more you can explore.
Well, that's just it. You don't know that you're just studying the bare tip. You don't know that you're standing on just the tip of the iceberg. At least you don't understand how big the iceberg is underneath that tip, and just how much you know about any particular subject.
It's just but when you don't know what you don't know, aren't you willing to improve?
One would hope so.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Isn't that really in regard to the individual personality? So some people are driven, and some people simply are not. Some people are quite contented to sit and watch every soap opera every night.
Fair enough.
People want to go out and be the best sports person they can, who play football or a different sport every night. I think it's easy to drop into stereotypes, but I think there are sufficient enough intelligent young people out there to not suddenly bomb to the lowest common denominator. I think there are bad information that does travel very quickly these days, but so does good information. I think there are, when there are buzzwords and trendy words, the younger generations have always done it. There always have buzzwords that are around for 5 years and then never hear of them.
Yeah.
And so things do spread very quickly like wildfire these days. Ideas, good or bad. I wouldn't just say that, well, the younger generation have all kind of become zombies on account of the overload of information that they're receiving, and they are not filtering it very, very well and just choosing the worst parts of it, because I'm sure that is not the case.
One of those topics that I know that you have a lot to discuss about is feminism. And I do want to ask, how was the first wave of feminism different to today's third wave of feminism? So, like, for example, back in the day, it was more about work, gender equality, and whatnot. It was very fair, in my opinion, but now it's like the message is being forced upon that we need to be the superior race, or we need to be the superior gender, and what are your opinions about that, basically? That's how I feel from what I've seen.
My opinion about that is that, first of all, the only feminism obviously started way back. Just women getting the vote or whatever. But
getting to work
became very conscious of it maybe in the early 80s when more and more feminists were being, or lesbians were coming out and having a presence and beginning to influence things. And there is no doubt that feminism was needed. And because women were not treated equally. It was only in 1972, I think, when the Equality Act came out, whereby women were at that point supposed to get an equal pay for an equal job. And there's no doubt that feminism, for me, was needed and improved the world, or the Western world anyway, because I don't think it really exists that much in Asia where we are now, most of Asia. But we got to a point whereby I think it's become somewhat distorted, to the point at which even Jermaine Greer is now a hated figure by the new rap feminist. So, why is she a hated figure? Because she thinks that women are generally born as women. That's quite simply it. And so what's happened is that people that have been through an operation or whatever, like the swimmer who was as we talk, that gigantic swimmer who clearly slowed down so he can beat the world record. Or she, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a fair point. Jermaine Greer's got a fair point. But she is of the belief that it's completely unfair for a man who's grown up as a man, has the muscles of a man, the body of a man, to compete in women's sports, because clearly that woman has an advantage.
Yes.
A massive advantage. So things have become very distorted. And I think that
what about all the pronouns? What about all the pronouns and all the confusion that it's had on the influence on younger people, allowing themselves to call, all the she's and bees and gwees and all the different, other than he and she and all the other pronouns, thee and zer and God knows what else. The confusing pronouns.
See, that is just that. I'll be honest with you, I find that laughable.
And why do you think it's allowed to happen, though? Why do you think it's allowed to happen?
Because
hasn't that debate been, hasn't that already been sorted? That we've already figured out there's two genders and two genders only. Why does it have to be more confusing than it is?
Well, I think
I'm not saying that being LGBTQ is wrong. You can be whoever you want to be in the end of the day, but again, if you're doing combat sports or anything like that, you can't expect the world to reason with you. If a man's fighting with a woman in a woman's let's say fighting UFC, you wouldn't see a man who's transitioned to a woman fight an actual woman. You wouldn't. It's just not possible. It's unfair. The level of testosterone, everything. It's unfair. Again, body mass, muscle mass. How can you reason with it?
Well, I think what's happened is that it's very kind of fashionable in Western society to be seen to be progressive, and And this politics has therefore had little resistance because you look like the oppressor if you voice out against them.
But we're voicing out.
As an oppressor.
I feel like we're voicing out equity, not equality. They're doing equality. They're voicing out equality, whereas I'm voicing out equity, fairness, justice, in a sense. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do what they're doing, but to compete with someone of the opposite gender, that's obviously unfair, and you've got the upper hand. How's that? How can you reason?
Yeah, well, I'm sure some of those female fighters could absolutely beat the living daylights out of
Some, sure.
But putting them in against another male fighter, I mean, it's asking for the trouble. I don't know. Maybe it will happen. Maybe the likes of the new Serena Williams will come and hold their own against male players. But there's no doubt that most of the world records that men hold.
But what does it mean to be a man at that point?
Well, yes. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think there's a lot of women in sport who really do not want people that have changed sex competing in their sport.
Yeah, of course. Well,
and you don't say anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at their faces on the podium and they're getting the silver and the bronze, you know they're not happy about it.
Yeah, I feel like it can be achieved, sure, but at the cost of freedom and individuality. I think one's utopia is another dystopia. So, like, if they do want that to happen, it's going to be at the cost of freedom and individuality. Again, what does it mean to be a woman? If you've got men transitioning to women, fighting women, what does it mean to be a woman at that point?
Yeah.
Or the opposite, vice versa. You know, that's how I feel.
Well, it's a very complex subject, and for somebody my age to be even I think Jordan Peterson has done it so well.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware of the amount of abuse that he currently has to deal with, but at least he's got about 50.
He's so smart.
IQ higher than mine, so he can defend himself. But
okay, well, let's move on. I don't really want to stick with the feminism for too long, but next question would be: inflated, unrealistic self-imagery with men's so-called standards, and does social media inflate one's ego or deflate one's ego? Knowing of the unrealistic self-imagery and standards.
Both.
Yeah, because I don't know, men.
It's creating suicides. It's creating bullying. Not that suicide and bullying didn't always exist, but because, I mean, just Facebook is like a personal CV. It's like a personal public relations. It's like your ongoing public relations CV. And you are there to try and promote yourself, to make yourself
in the hierarchy of social media.
Yeah, exactly. You're battling. So psychologically, you don't want to feel like the bottom of your social group. Nobody does. That's all subconscious. But you don't want to be the runt in the litter, the kid at school that always gets bullied or badly treated.
Yeah.
So there's a human need to want respect, but that respect now has become. They think that vanity. They think that it's all about vanity and ego. But for me, wanting respect is the respect for being a decent human being, a well-rounded human being that treats everybody fairly, that looks after somebody if they're not well, or if they need some money, or they need a hand up in one way or another.
It's just being there for someone. It's like being there for someone at all costs, basically.
Yes, not necessarily being the best looking or having the best physique. I can't go onto YouTube these days. I don't know what you call them, but they're these shorts, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant. So with these shorts, you see guys with
men showing their muscles.
Yeah.
Why? they keep coming up because they never go into them.
That's what I meant. So with social media, on every scroll that you do, you'll see like, oh, how to be a big man, or like, oh, how to earn $1,000 every day, or how to earn $500,000 every 2 months, or whatnot. I feel like men tend to overvalue that masculinity aspect, and with his persona, and then he plays the big, oh, I'm the strong man, for that kind of persona, while the whole feminine aspect remains unconscious, and like, he leaves that aspect outside of his actual perception on how he sees and also how he presents himself in the world. Because he's just trying to be the big man, trying to be the strong man the whole time, not actually going into himself and saying, do I really feel this way? Do I really have the time to think about this? With that thinking process, does he have really time to say all this? Because on social media, it's telling him, yes, this is right, this is the absolute truth, this is what you should be, this is what you should become, this is what males should be as a physique, with six packs and big arms, or you need a good job who earns $500,000 every 2 months, that we tend to overvalue that masculine aspect, and guys my age will fall for it. They will fall for it, and then when they realize, oh, we can't do it, or that's not realistic, they fall into this lack of higher value, and they say, oh no, why has it not happened to me, or why is this, why has this not come to my life? Or why can't I do it like they do on the internet? Or why can't I have six-pack abs and big muscles and whatnot? And doesn't it deflate someone's someone's ego in a sense? It has to. When you're comparing yourself constantly.
I assume that they wouldn't do it, and the fact that they're on YouTube showing their big muscles, I suspect it inflates their ego rather than demoralises them. It's everyone else like me and you that's watching those big muscles that get deflated, or if we even go into them. But I mean, it's always been competitive. Life is competitive. I mean, there's always been guys that go out there and build big muscles and take steroids,
but that's not, again,
they're not necessarily going to be going to Oxford or Cambridge.
But that social media is pushing that as the meaning of life. Like, you need to have these things in order to be happy, or you need to have these things in order to find value in your life. Or, do this and do this and do this and you'll be successful. Or do this and do this and you'll be a happy person. Or, you have these countless of skids on social media telling you what to do, basically. And it's all a bunch of crap. It's all
I mean, what maybe those guys that do all that money?
No, but it's so common to the point that everyone's doing the same thing. It's so common that everyone's spreading the same message at this point. It's not like individualized for one content person who's putting out content out there. It's literally the same thing being scripted through, and it's like an algorithm. It's like an algorithm where you can't get away from it, even if you try to. Even you're 60 years old, why would you be having 20-year-old men advertising on your phone? Why?
I don't know, that's obviously because the algorithm's not...
Exactly. The algorithm, though. Exactly. Why? Like, why? That's where I try and question it. That's where I really try and question it, because the dangerous thing about it is people simply back an idea straightforwardly to look good in the eyes of others, even if they do not truly believe in the cause they publicly support. So, would you call this virtue signaling?
They are, on the one hand, highly competitive to the point at which young, beautiful girls who don't have a lot to say, really, other than just be there and look beautiful, can actually become multi-millionaires and are basically using big sponsorship deals. So, and then you've got the guys spending 8 hours a day in the gym, but maybe it's their choice.
No, but doesn't that affect the actual reality?
Well, go and spend 8 hours a day reading books and then go and get yourself a job, and then you'll be driving around in a Ferrari. By the time you've got the six-pack that you want and the big biceps, and if you didn't do that and you spent it in education, you'd have a Ferrari then. So which one do you want?
But my question would be, like, doesn't it affect the interpersonal connection? So, for example, let's say that girl who looks pretty and does nothing all day but is a multi-millionaire because she looks pretty. How would it affect my approach on the dating market, or even how would I feel approaching a girl like that if the market's... exactly. So like, no, but that's exactly like, yeah. But it's very hard to like find. How do I explain? It's very the approach on how to approach people nowadays because of the social media effect. It's not the same as compared to 30 years ago, where you would just literally approach someone and say, "How are you doing?" Get to know someone and basically have a conversation straight from the get-go with a complete stranger. Nowadays, it's very tense. It wouldn't go. You would have to do a lot of thinking before you make your first move nowadays. You'd have to scope the situation out, Whereas back in the day, there wouldn't be that anxiety. There wouldn't be that tense process of should I do it, should I not? Oh my God, what's her name? Her social media status, so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that compared to the 80s growing up now, it's far more complicated from where I sit. But I'm not that person that has to go and actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
What I do know is that there have always been guys that do bodybuilding. There have always been the so-called dumb blonde that make a living out of modeling or whatever. These people have always existed. But I think now it's just so dominating and grossly exaggerated.
It's become the social norm.
Young people to actually ignore. I mean, I can't ignore the bodybuilding thing because it pops up on my screen every single day.
Not even bodybuilders. Let's just say like dudes who are like in suits and they're like proud to say on camera that I loan $2 million from the bank every month. But it's sort of all the bullshit narrative that they try and push it forward. Like, oh, I earn this much and this much, and I own this much to the bank. And so where I come from, taking a loan from the bank is like disgraceful, it's frowned upon, it's just like, why would you even say such a thing on camera to a bunch of kids, like they should take loans from the bank and they should do this and do that? It's like a bad message to send out. It's not. What about the working hard and the process and the whole enjoying it from the get-go and, working hard for your money and, that's self-integrity in my opinion, having respect for yourself, not doing it the fast lane way, or like you said, have no moral or ethics to make a living, basically.
Those guys are trying to sell
a false image.
Their methodology, their courses. They join my monthly personal scheme, my elite scheme, and I will give you personal advice on.
But there's so many.
Make millions. It's salesmanship. It's just an advertisement. If you think they've got anything to offer other than possibly a means by which to make money quickly. That's all it is, and there used to be adverts like that in newspapers, the back of newspapers. Buy this book and you will be rich within 5 years.
But it wasn't really in your face, it was on a newspaper on the back end.
Yeah. That's not good. Everything is in your face. Everything is the pressure that is on you. I mean, if you happen to be, some kid that is actually not academically that bright and is small and gets bullied at school, I mean, they must be lowered every time they open up social media. They must feel beaten up every time. It's a horrible place to live.
Of course.
And the elite, or those that think they're elite, or paid money to be beautiful, or have muscular bodies, or whatever, it's
increases.
There's got a massive gap between the beautiful and the average.
But when you look at the actual productivity that goes on in our race at the moment with these younger generations, do you think that there's any actual productivity making money in that sense? It's not like they're educating anyone, let's be real. When you're selling courses, it's not like you're educating, it's just selling courses, it's advertising, like you said. You wouldn't say it's part of the education industry. It's not like they're giving I don't know, it's just, would you say it's useful into people's eyes? Would you say,
I would think that maybe some of these people have done business studies and gone into their niche and taken their experience from a degree in business studies and applied it and been successful. But being successful like that is not always just a methodology. It's also
depends on how you see it.
A lot of commitment and maybe some money in the bank from the parents. You don't really know what formula they have.
Yeah. True. All right, I want to move on to the next topic, which is futures freedom. And I'm sure you know George Orwell in his book 1984. The question is, will there be psychological manipulation? Debatable already. Mass surveillance? Debatable already. Control of mind and body? Control of information and history? Control of language? And eradication of individuality. So, do you think all of this will happen?
All of the above. What you prove?
Why is that?
Well, one, you can see it.
Yeah.
You know it. And it's, as technology progresses, it will just slowly increase. I mean, the village I've just left, there were facial recognition cameras installed, half a dozen of them around the village, about 6 months before I left. It's a tiny little village, full of old grannies and old men, really. Why any facial recognition cameras are needed in a place like that is beyond me. But do I really have the power to phone up Beijing on the hotline and say, can you take those cameras down because I don't want them? I mean, the fact that they have been getting away with it for so long, and those CCTV cameras, of which Britain, by the way, has, to my knowledge, per head of capita, as many as anyone, as many as China. They have them everywhere. I suppose they will always use the argument, and have always used the argument, that if you are not a criminal, then there's nothing to fear. And it sounds like a strong argument, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like an argument, but you know where it goes. It means total control.
Yeah.
But that argument's been used such that en masse, we have never actually en masse protested about all of those CCTV cameras that are all over the world now. They're in America, or times I've been to America, there's plenty of them around. There's certainly plenty of them in China. Even here in Macau, they're installing them, I believe, you know better than me, but they're installing them in Hong Kong.
Yes, they've got walking pattern recognition, facial recognition, speech recognition. It's crazy.
Exactly.
But when you say they get away with it, and with that statement that you said, if you're not a criminal, we do not worry, or there's nothing to worry, is it because with allowing it to happen, we're not allowing it to happen because we can't do anything about it, but does that mean that precautions somewhat lose their relevance because we're allowing it to happen in a sense?
What it implies is that if you're not a criminal, you've got anything, you haven't got anything to fear. So the moment you say, I don't like those cameras, you feel like a criminal. Because you're obviously doing something illicit.
Yeah.
It's not the case. I mean, that's the point. They make you feel like a criminal just because you don't want so many of them. But they have got a very strong argument when you look at some of those city centres in Britain. Again, on modern media, you can see city centres everywhere kicking off with the most appalling people. And it used to be just young men. It's women now, and old men, and every man and his dog is just a free-for-all.
Yeah.
I think I would be terrified to even walk around some of those town centres on a Friday and Saturday night.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I think maybe, and this would sound really quite right-wing 30, 40 years ago, maybe a police presence is better than all those cameras. Because you can see them, and it's a deterrent. The cameras are concealed.
And that's physical form as well.
There's a physical presence there, and you know that, therefore, that guy is law enforcement. And if you're out of order, they're going to come down. Camera allows the offence to happen, and it provides footage to then capture the culprit and take them to court. So, but it doesn't prevent it. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
All it does is mean that
doesn't solve the actual problem.
Resolve it later if they can even find the culprit.
Yes. so it doesn't actually solve any problems. It just it just causes fear.
Clearly, all of this information that we now have and can hold on computers rather than paper in a library, which is all, I mean, that's where I studied. It's only 40 years ago. All those books I went into, all those old documents, you used to have to go get permission, look at them on the microfiche, and see what was hidden behind in the library, and get that document out and go through it. These don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, the dark ages are called the dark ages because nobody could read or write.
Yeah, illiterate. Yeah.
Yes, there are no, there are very limited, limited knowledge about them. We go back, we have even less knowledge.
Yeah.
It's just about what we can find. But clearly, I mean, when in 2022 is going to be very well documented, such that in 2,000 years old, I suspect, people will know exactly what we live like.
But there's so much, like you said, there's so much going on. What is there to, like, which ones do we document down? Which ones have so much importance? Or is everything literally being docked down? Every specific event that happens in the world, because there's so many now, whereas back in the day, there'd be a huge event every, maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. Now it's literally every month, every day, or every week. Even there's something going on around the world.
I suspect time and history will decide which events are the ones that will
matter.
Matter. So out and become like iconic photographs in terms of history.
Brian, so I remember you asked me to listen to this song called Hong Kong by Gorillaz, and there's this part that I want to read to you, and I want to see how you interpretate it. So it says, "What you're learning in school is the rise of the eastern sun on a big blue for everyone. The radio station disappeared, music turned into thin air. The DJ was the last to leave. She had well-conditioned hair, was beautiful, but nothing was really there." So what do you think of that?
I think the first sentence could be interpreted by every individual in different ways. It's really quite abstract.
Yeah.
And I think the later sentence just is what it says. But I believe actually he was
beautiful song, by the way.
Heroin at the time, and probably being influenced by William Burroughs and the like, and I know, I think it was David Bowie who used to get words and simply cut them off.
Oh wow!
And piece them back and get songs out of them. So and I think William Burroughs' writing technique is pretty much like broken thoughts, and it's a broken thought. It's not a writing as in describing the physical. It's how you think when you're just sort of dreaming, or maybe he's just come out of a club, or I mean, that song for me is just beautifully written and evocative, and so I imagine it's just clipping individual thoughts together. It doesn't have to. It's not describing a physical scene.
Yeah.
Individual thoughts that are just linked together, and when you do that, it creates a completely different
understanding
image to each single person.
But I think that's that level of abstraction of how you can abstract whatever lyrics that they put upon, because the more time you think about it, the better idea you're going to get out of it as well, I believe. So I think a lot of it has to, it's like artwork. The more time you put into it, the better the artwork is. But anyways, another thing is freedom of speech when it comes to future freedom. And this is also from George Orwell. He says, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, George Orwell wrote it in 1948.
Yeah.
And it's not like we haven't seen this coming. But what have we done to stop it?
But what does it mean to have freedom of speech?
In school, certainly in Britain, and I believe in America, it's been taught in school as a standard subject, a standard book since certainly the 60s, maybe before. So we all know what its message is. We all know what it is describing. But we've allowed society to basically just go along that path without any resistance whatsoever. I think it's maybe because we don't know how to resist technology. I mean, you know how to, when a company like P&O Ferries this weekend has just sacked all its workers and just employed a load more because they're only £2 an hour. We all know how to stand up to that because we can all do a picket, a protest, or send letters in and say that is immoral. You just can't do that, especially when you've had $12 million furlough from the government.
So what does that mean to even have freedom of
So you
speech?
don't have to resist and protest against something like that.
Yeah.
But how do you resist and protest against the slow creep of technology that only changes week by week or month by month or year by year? It's like watching ivy grow over an old building. You can't perceive it unless you go 1 month and go 3 months later. You might notice it, but if you walk past it every day, you don't even know that ivy is slowly strangling that building. So I don't think we know how to fight it, and I think that we're going to get to the point where it will be too late to fight.
Yeah.
Because you or me, before you've even started to try to form a group that's going to fight against it, you will already be in prison. Because the technology is so advanced, you won't even be able to get emails.
So what does it even mean to have freedom of speech at that point? What does it mean to have all these privileges and not be able to use them as a human being?
Well, you said as a human being, but that's the point, is that the human being is becoming redundant.
Now, that actually comes up to my last section of this whole podcast, is how do we overcome and discuss things at a time? And the first section is, how do we actually resist categorical thinking? I guess that's also a huge problem in today's society, where we always try and tend to think categorically because it makes us easier to think and a lot more comfortable as well to progress in life, to think in categories instead of independently thinking. And why do you think that is?
I think that's part of how the brain works. It's like when a postman used to store letters, and that one's going to Derby, that one's going to Leicester, that one's going to Nottingham. You compartmentalise. And it enables you to put all of the relevant subjects in each relevant box. So, and if you take away that framework, you just have chaos. I mean, it's a way of organising your brain and your thought process.
Order and chaos. Yeah.
Well, if you I mean, I remember I met a guy once in Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia when Tito was in power. And there, if you got a degree in a subject and you got a very good, successful result, you were allowed to go, paid by the government, to go and do another degree in a completely different subject.
Oh, wow.
And then if you got a good result there, you could go and
get as many as you want.
So what we tend to do in our system, kind of, we go down a cul-de-sac very early on in life, and from the moment you do your degree generally, and then to try and think out anything other than outside that particular cul-de-sac, because your weight of knowledge is overwhelming in that area, and it's very thin and dodgy on every other subject. So it's very difficult unless there is an individual, unless you've got that real inquisitiveness to go and search and read about every other subject.
It's a continuum.
I think by definition we end up fairly specialised in the way we think, and a part of that is because you need to do that these days in order to keep employed. You have to be good at one specific thing, because if you're average at 10 things, you're never going to get a job. Yeah.
You have to make yourself unique in some sense.
It requires a specialisation.
Yeah.
And that encourages a very narrow-minded way of thinking. I mean, it's not all bad. I mean, I had a friend an architecture school, and his father was a doctor down in London, and he specialised in land. Do you know what I mean? Land.
Yeah.
But that land just has infinite effect on the body. So I'm not saying it's completely wrong in some ways, but I just think that's the way the human race is. If you want a rounded education over and above that, I'm afraid that that's up to the individual to go out and dig in and find that. I think most people have at least one passion in life. If you haven't even got one single passion in life, then you just got dealt a very bad hand.
Yeah.
But I think that most people,
hopefully,
have 2 or 3 talents.
Yeah. Sure. Now, the next question is, do you think people really do shape their lives through their actions, or through their thoughts, which lead to action?
I think there's no doubt that Jordan Peterson has said this, right? If you've got a high IQ, you've got that advantage. If then you are conscientious, you put conscientiousness on top of IQ, then that is an advantage. You can shape your life if you've got those 2 attributes. If you have to be born, or what happens if you were a gifted football? Haaland, who I read a report on yesterday, somebody's going to buy him for $300 million. That's what they're selling him, because he's such a natural footballer.
Yeah.
So, but that's nature. That's real nature that's shaped him. And I think IQ is nature as well.
In a sense, yeah.
So, if you're born with a gift, and then you are conscientious on top of that,
aware of it,
you can really excel. Then you are able to shape your life more so than somebody who doesn't have that privilege as well. Money privilege. Do you think race privilege as well has a play in it as well?
Yes. Yeah. Now, Jordan Peterson, you just mentioned, I'm going to say something that he's also said as well, that you have to contemplate the price you pay for inaction. And I completely agree with that, 100%. You can't just wait for handouts or wait for something to happen. You've actually, even if you've got the talent, even if you've got the great skills to be a great footballer, you actually have to go out there and do the hard work as well. And that takes a lot of effort, not even just being conscious of it, but a lot of effort as well, and being confident in your own abilities to do so.
You have to work. When you've worked, you have to work harder and then work harder again. And if you get all the successful people on this planet, I claim to be one, many out there, they are absolutely committed to what they do. They make massive sacrifices in their lives to achieve. Somebody wins an Olympic medal. Yeah, sure, they're naturally gifted. But some of these Russian, Chinese girls that get the gold medal by the time they're 17, they've been doing gymnastics since they were 3. Yeah. They've been up at 5 a.m. every morning. Yeah. And swimmers as well. And top professors, it doesn't matter wherever they are, whatever field they're in. A gift obviously helps, but without, you can have the best gift in the world. But without just working at it, you'll probably squander it.
And do you think it also has to involve being curious as well? And is that a value to hold when you're trying to achieve things? Like, let's say you do have the talent and you do have the hard work. Is it also important to put the element of being curious at all times?
I think curiosity is a great advantage because it means you are intrigued by life and you never stop asking the question why, which means that you are, by definition, going to go out searching and asking questions and learn.
Find those reasons to that why that you just asked yourself. You're going to go out and actually have that want to find the reasons of why, those answers of the why, basically.
Yeah, if indeed there is an answer.
Yeah, but that's always personified to the person or the individual. Not everyone's looking for the same thing, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I know I went travelling when I was young and I was determined to do it. I wanted to do it. There's no big financial reward at the end of it. In fact, I would have been far wiser to have taken that money and invested it and put it down on the house. But I preferred just to go out and do an adventure.
But the experience itself was probably 10 times the amount of a learning curve than it is to buy a house and sit on it for the next 10 years.
And sit at home in the living room and watch soap.
Or like wait for you to rent it out to someone. Exactly. So doing 10 years of traveling compared to that, I would say, I know which one I would pick, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it financially, it's a wrong choice.
But it depends on what you're looking for. And again, success is like how you perceive that word and what success is to you. And like it depends if you want to be learning about cultures and traditions, or if you want to have $1 million in the bank. You know, it depends what you want in the end of the day.
Yeah, that brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, whereby we discussed basically what is integrity and what is it mean to be grounded.
Yeah, so that's actually the last part of this whole conversation here, where I'm going to bring up self-dignity, integrity of human soul, and I feel like being self-dismissive is a very bad thing as well. Not being self-dismissive is something that we should aim and strive to be. And what does that mean? Not being self-dismissive.
I think it means to be humble, doesn't it? And to be able to laugh at the stupidity of your mistakes, to realise how stupid you can be on a regular basis, and we don't just go like that through life.
But accept it as a humility in a sense, but also as a privilege to get and gain that experience of being humbled in a sense. Sorry. Wrong choices of words there, but yeah. And also, I find it that being able to access the pleasure from whatever we're doing, whatever effort we put out there, is so important to someone in the sense that it will fulfill your day, it will fulfill who you are as a human being in whatever effort you put out there. And being able to genuinely enjoy it, being able to access the pleasure from whatever effort that we do, is that an importance, in a sense, to our self-integrity and self-dignity?
I'm not sure if it's pleasure or pleasure.
But finding pleasure in
fulfillment, I think, is a better word rather than pleasure. Yeah, fulfillment. I often think about, just the song that we spoke about before.
Yeah.
Can you imagine when, just as he left the studio, he played that back to himself after all of that recording live? The immense amount of satisfaction and fulfillment that he must have got from doing that. It's like an artist completing a great work of art. It's like a craftsman just finishing a beautiful wooden ship, or completing some good restoration. It's very fulfilling, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything to anyone else at the end of the day. It's what it gives you. I mean, could you write a brilliant book? Could you write a brilliant book, be fulfilled, and set fire to it? Or is the fulfillment in the accolade you get afterwards?
Yeah.
In stroking of the ego? Could you paint a fantastic painting and say, well, I feel fulfilled, now I'm going to set fire to it?
Does it have to stroke the ego though?
That's my point. What is fulfillment? Is it a part of the people saying you're brilliant, or is it the actual final execution of the great work of art?
Interesting, yeah. And lastly is, how do we achieve full democracy to continue the dialogue between different types of people, so we don't actually go far to the right or far to the left, or even just stone cold where we don't even move?
Democracy is under constant erosion. And people, I don't think we realise it. And it's being eroded within the democratic countries itself. That might be a threat to democracy. Russia might be a threat to democracy. North Korea might be a threat to democracy. You've got on the right-wing side, you've got, take America, I believe that ExxonMobil has something like 200 lobbyists who are all trained lawyers, lobbying to distort and influence laws that are passed through the government. You had tobacco companies, not anymore, but you used to have tobacco companies that would lobby to ensure that tobacco laws didn't change. So the big influential companies pay big legal teams to lobby government. So governments, the representatives that are paid off, they're paid off, like Big Pharma paid off on the opioid crisis. Doctors' reports, politicians' reports. So that's democracy being eroded there. We see democracy being eroded on the so-called woke left, whereby you can't laugh at jokes anymore, you're being told what you can think and what you can say.
And the risk of being cancelled.
Democracy.
Yeah.
We've got the cameras everywhere, facial recognition. We've got China that's trying to, through the Confucius establishments that it's set up in all the universities in Western countries, undermining democracy. So it's been eroded in all directions, and just like when I mentioned before that technology is slowly eroding our freedoms, I think we're not really aware just how subtly and slowly democracy is being strangled and squeezed. And if we don't respond quickly enough, we will be fighting to get our democracy back. And it's a lot easier to maintain one than it is to establish one. And then the other thing about democracy is that it's not a fixed idea. It's constantly changing and adapting to every new generation and every country and every society. So it's not a fixed idea.
And is that
allowed to go flourish?
And is that why it's not favourable for the New World leaders? I would call them. Is it not favourable because it's so adaptive in a sense where human beings can thrive amazingly under full democracy? And is that why they try and do not push that agenda? Instead, push more of a forced set of lines and set of rules that we have to follow. And if we don't follow them, we have no choice. We don't even have the concept of having a choice because it's so subtle and deceptive that we're forced.
Dictators don't like sharing power. Democracy, the people have the power and they have delegates who are called House representatives or MPs. They are our representatives. We have the power because after 4 years, if we don't want them, we just say, we're not voting for you. You're out.
But
so we have to vote them in or vote them out.
But
dictatorships don't like shared power. They simply don't want the people to have any power. They want singular power where they hold it all.
So I'm going to bring up the monetary system, monetary policies here. It's just when you say that, they use money obviously to get their way, and when they put in constructs like you said, when they get lawmakers to make laws that are favorable for them, when they make the situation a lot better for them themselves, they can abuse their power in order to get what they want. When I say that, like the uses of manipulation tactics or the subtle form of how they get us to use their technology.
Well, when Big Pharma or tobacco companies or oil companies manage to grease the palm of democratic representatives, I think it's illegal for one thing. But they just don't get rumbled, they don't get caught. But rest assured, they're being courted by those lobbyists. They are being,
like in Indonesia, where
entertained to ensure that when the vote comes within the House of Representatives or the House of Parliament, the vote goes in their favour. So, I mean, that sort of thing needs to be controlled because it's undemocratic.
And it's obviously corruption as well that has to play a role in in it.
Sure, and democracy can't exist with corruption, but isn't that one of the great things about democracy? Is well, most of the democratic countries, corruption exists everywhere, but the amount of corruption that exists in second, third world countries is endemic. Are you talking about the Belt and Road system in Africa?
And how they're funding it is ridiculous to me.
That's called loan sharking.
But it's just, how do they get away with it? How?
Because the African leaders are part of a very dodgy democratic system whereby basically they're gangsters themselves that use power and money to be elected within the so-called democratic system. But they know that they will only be there for a very short period of time, 10 years maximum. So they are going to make hay while the sun shines. And if China want to sell them a high-speed train that nobody gets on or nobody gets off, but it creates a debt trap for them, then they will take it. They'll take the bribe. It will go to the British Virgin Islands, or like the Panama Papers has revealed, or Switzerland. And money has been siphoned off by these dodgy so-called democracies in dictatorships to all of these places. It's another thing that democracy should do. Who owns all of these places where the dirty money is being laundered and siphoned? It's Britain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they only do it. I mean, it's another thing that you would have thought when Panama Papers were issued, that
we wouldn't make the same mistake. Yeah.
They're not acting on it because, well, they're all investment over there, they've all got their bank accounts over there.
Yeah.
That's what I'm on about. That why democracy is being undermined by so-called Democrats. We need to go back and really chase the real model of democracy instead of letting this diluted version really gain power.
I would like to read something. So when you said that, it's so funny that Democrats are like undermining democracy itself. I just want to read this little part here. It says, "It is a strange paradox that liberals are illiberal in their demand for liberality. They are exclusive in their demand for exclusivity. They are somewhat undiverse in their call for diversity, but not diverse in your opinions or in your language or in your behavior. And that is a terrible pity."
Yeah, well, I don't know who that came from, but that's clearly in regard to
Stephen Fry, mock debate, political correctness, or force of Fry. Yeah, Stephen Fry. That's who it was.
Yes, he's quite right. So, you know who he is? He went to Oxford. He's a comedian. He's gay. So, and the reason I mentioned gay, not because it's an issue, but because he's what I'm saying is he's anti.
All right, so I remember you saying that when you were 24, you made a decision to travel or buy a house. And do you think making the decision to travel and move around and experience the world and learning different perspectives and traditions and cultures gave you more of a fulfillment than actually buying a house and going along with that instead?
Well, you never really know, do you? Because what happened if, say, I bought that house, say I had then made money, maybe I'd have set up a company, maybe I'd have then gone on even longer travel, and maybe I'd have ended up setting up a company like The Lonely Planet and writing books. So you never know whether the choice that you made in life was the right one. You never will. You just got to be comfortable that it was the right decision for you. Based on all the information you had at the time, you made the right decision. But, life's like going up through a tree. I mean, you can end up on as any leaf on that tree. It depends which branch you go down, which twig you go on. So, I don't think that's the answer that I have, or anyone has, whether they've made the right decisions in life. There's certainly a lot of people who say that they've made a lot of bad decisions. I don't regret the decisions I've made in life, but there are a lot that could have been a lot better.
That's very interesting.
The decision you make in life is going to be so perfect. So
it's very interesting because when I speak to people like my nan, it's not, when I ask the same question, it's not really that she regretted anything that she did not do. It's more that what she could have done more instead of regretting what she already had done, because she knew that she could have done a bit more than, instead of like regretting and feel bad about what you've done in the past, it's more about what you could have done more in the past instead of, oh, was it the right decision or was it a bad decision? Or, instead of looking at it that way, it's more healthier to look at it as, oh, the time that I had, what could I have done else? Instead of...
Yeah, but maybe your grandmother spent a lot of time bringing kids up.
Yeah.
She didn't have the money to go travelling, so she could well, at her age of life, regret not having travelled.
Well, she lived through the World Wars.
She didn't really have the opportunity, but you can still regret not having the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're asking is, if you have the opportunity and you fail to take those opportunities, you're not brave enough, or you're too shy, or you're not confident, or you just won't take a risk, or you like sitting at watching soap operas, then they're decisions you regret.
And is that a form of And is that a form of being self-dismissive in a sense? Or is that just...
it's a reality, isn't it? You can only fulfill or fail to fulfill real opportunities. And if you don't, that opportunity doesn't come along. So then how can you regret it? Because it was never really a possibility.
Yeah.
It was a reality. It wasn't something that was presented to you that you walked away from that you regret. So there's two forms of regret. There's the regret where you failed to take a brilliant opportunity that was like a red carpet and you chose not to go down it. And there's the other one where you were just surrounded by brick walls and you couldn't get out. That's not an opportunity. If you're in a prison surrounded by 4 brick walls, then your opportunities aren't that much. And that's what sometimes having no money is like. And young people.
And that's where money privilege comes in as well.
Absolutely. So but that's why if you can, and I'm not saying it is now, but certainly when I was young, there was still an educational system that was free until you were 21. All the fees were paid. I got a grant of £1,000 a term, and £1 a week.
Yeah.
I had to work well to supplement that, but at least Britain, as a young British person, was still giving you an opportunity to get a degree, use whatever talent you had, and build a career, get some money, fulfill your dreams and your ambitions. But this has been taken away now.
Yes.
So people
admit that
who went to the school that I went to, it's been burned down. I went there. Anyway, you don't have a chance.
Admit to that problem though. Admit to that problem. Is it because the value of money as well? I think the value of money has changed. The concept of money has changed. Now, like, anyone can go to university. Whereas back in the day, you'd have to have academic school, you'd have to have money as well, but not just that, you'd actually have to be, there was, I don't know, standards in a sense. Now anyone could go to university and get a degree, whereas back in the day it was not as accessible or even feasible to do so.
Well, I think that everyone should have an equal opportunity to go there, just because, I mean, why, for example, why does it everyone goes to Oxford and Cambridge? Why do they all come from public schools whereby it's cost their parents £50,000 a year to send them? So they get all the advantage of the best education in the world. And then when they get to 18, suddenly they go into a university that is paid for by the government. So they steal all the best places from other people that are coming from poorer backgrounds. So this is why they turn polytechnics into universities and why they try to give everyone a fair crack at the whip and say, go and get a degree. Doesn't matter what it is, try and take an opportunity, try and get educated and get somewhere.
Yeah.
That has been reeled back now. In the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, that series has been reeled back. Now, if you do come from a poorer area anywhere in the world, then you, in Britain, where they were trying to at least give you a chance, they don't even do that anymore. Unless your parents are middle class, wealthy, you're not going to university. It's gone back to exactly like it was in the 1950s.
And why would you say we've not progressed? Why have we gone back to where we were?
Progressed and now we retrogressed. Because the government now demanding that each student pays course fees. They don't give any grants to support them. And so if you're a single parent family, you've got a mother that is doing 2 jobs, one at McDonald's and one cleaning loos down the railway station or something, and she's got 3 kids, how could you possibly start afford to pay?
Yes.
To be paying £3,000 a term.
But yet you've got
or 3 years to get you an education.
Yeah, you've got people on the dole with no shame. They've got Gucci bags and Prada bags and tattoos all over them, and it's this whole value of money that's changed, and the concept of sacrifice as well has changed. Would you agree? Those 2 words, money and sacrifice?
You can get money from sacrifice. There's an idea that materialism is not required, and not required, but materialism is bad thing. Earning money is bad. But earning money actually gives you liberty. That's what people forget.
And it's such a hard topic to talk about.
It gives you the freedom to take a year off work, to go traveling. It gives you the money to go and do a course that you want to do. Money can buy you freedom.
And it's such a taboo to tell this to some people because they won't accept it. They will say, oh, money is the evil of all roots and da-da-da-da-da. But in the end of the day, it does give you freedom. It does give you, like you said, you can do what you want when you've got money. You have these opportunities. You have these choices that you can make with money because money privilege is a thing. Like, if you had money, you could send your children to university. If you had money, you could basically go on a 3-month holiday. If you had money, you could do so many different things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So although I don't think money is the end game, money doesn't bring you fulfillment. Getting £100,000 in your bank account is not necessarily fulfilling. It's what you can do with that money, the possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's what life is, but I'm saying it's a tool to give you time, and time to me is my currency. To be able to spend my time freely in whatever way I want to, and however way I want to.
Money allows you to buy your time back, to buy you liberty, to buy you freedom.
In a
It's the key. It's the key to get you out of jail.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Because without it, without money, other people dictate how you will spend your life.
Then why is it such a taboo? Why is it such a taboo to talk about the powers of money then?
I don't know, maybe because the people that think you don't need money already have it. So they don't really value it. So I don't know.
Fair enough.
You have to ask them.
Yeah.
As far as I can think, if you gave most people in Britain,
aren't the statistics in Britain like 4 out of 10 people are in debt or something though? Something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, in America, massively. Yeah.
And doesn't that affect the value of money itself and how we see money? And like again, with inflation rates being nearly 15%, what does that mean for us? What do we work for?
Well, That's because it's not. They're not buying those cars or those houses with money. They're buying them with loans. They're buying them with debt. And debt is not liberty. Debt is the exact opposite.
And that's where usury comes in, because when you take a debt, they're going to be giving it to you at a unreasonably high interest rate. Where would you call that legal at that point?
Well, the interest rates are not high at the moment from the banks. So they're as low as they've ever been.
But they want to be borrowing money. They want to be borrowing money to give them a reason of why they're printing out so much money.
Well, what people are doing is they're getting the loan up front. So they're buying things with money they don't have with the intention of paying it later. It seems to me that's some sort of slavery, because you've got the car, you've got the house, but now you need to work indefinitely to pay it off.
And what?
That's slavery. You're making a decision yourself which enslaves you.
And why do you think it's allowed to happen then?
It's not allowed to happen. People choose to do it. People are gullible, and therefore, because they are chasing materialism, and just as before that everyone's measuring
success.
Their wealth. So one person's got a better car than the other person. One person's got a better house. One person's gone on a better holiday. This elitism, superiority, and modern media is really in everyone's face.
And how do we fight that, Brian? How do we fight that whole idea? How do we say, not maybe like I'm not going to join in, but more like I am aware of all this. I'm aware of this picture. I'm aware of this structure, this message that they're trying to send, this success, ideal of success, or just comparing all the time. How does one deal with all that? In a sense,
you have to realise that the system is dragging you in, and that you're gullible for being dragged.
That's why I could never live in the city, because if I lived in the city, every street corner I go to, there's a Gucci, a Prada. I'd be spending money every day, every morning. Every time I walk out my house, I'd be spending so much money because of all the materialism that's coming down on me every time I walk down the street. And that's just being...
The reason companies spend so much money on advertisements is because they work. It's because there is success. And the more money you spend on advertising, the more profit the company will make. Advertising works. It's like propaganda. Propaganda for corporate brands.
Yeah.
It's successful. It works. So that's why there's more and more advertising.
But it's scary when they use human behavioral science and then use our hormones and study our wants and needs and desires to use that against us. Wouldn't you say that's already morally wrong?
Yeah, so if you respond to an advertisement, then you'll get more advertisements with similar brands. So what they will do is they'll say, right,
well, how do you fight the algorithm?
just looked at this advertisement. What are the products that they bought? Right, he's bought those products. Let's send in the advertising from those brands and see if they'll buy those as well. How you are being hypnotised and brainwashed into perpetuating buying ever more shit that you don't need to fill a wardrobe that's larger and larger.
But literally through the algorithm, how do we avoid falling for that algorithm that they present to us on a daily basis?
I'm conscious of the fact that it's an algorithm.
But like you said, from as soon as you wake up to the moment you go to bed, it's like there. It's literally there.
It's brainwashing. There's no doubt it's brainwashing. That's exactly what.
I like how you use that term, yeah.
So what you're saying to me is how you will avoid brainwashing.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, being hypnotized, yeah. It's just literally being self-aware of all of the things that are going on and being aware of the tactics that they're using. And just again, being aware of the algorithm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that most Russians actually believe that the Putin's aggression in Ukraine is all good. We're all happy with it.
Interesting.
There's no, they're not allowed to object. There's one TV station that bangs out propaganda, one news station that bangs out news for 3 hours each now.
Wow.
So they don't have a choice. The people in China don't have a choice. But at least the people in the West,
They have a say.
should be thinking and trying to look at, well, be aware that they're getting brainwashed by the advertising, but also it's the same with your politics. So if you start looking into your YouTube or whatever, and you start looking into certain websites, what is then suggested to you are other websites that will back up the opinion that you just read. So it consolidates itself.
Validates it.
With a very narrow point of view politically. So, and I think that is one of the reasons why the left wing and the right wing is becoming so stratified.
It causes internal conflict.
Yeah, they don't read about the other point of view. Because they're constant. Once you type in your point of view, what you're interested in, all you will be sent is information to back that point of view up. It won't give you the opposite.
Gotcha. You can't see both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, so we have left and right points of view, and they become very fixed, and there's no debate in the middle ground anymore. And it assumes, therefore everyone assumes that the opinion they have today, at their age, where they're feeling, is the opinion they're going to have in a year's time, or 5 years' time, or 10 years' time. But if your opinion changes, and anyway, why can't you politically, some of your ideas might lean towards the right in some instances, but on the same token, some of your opinions may be more left-leaning.
Well, the way I see it,
William Britain doesn't like the National Health Service.
Yeah.
Well, it's left-wing. It's a left-wing idea.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like the idea that all children should have free education until they're 16? Well, that's a left-wing idea.
But these are things that are, I believe, that are morally good anyways. You could tell it's morally good. Who wouldn't want children to not have a free education? Who wouldn't, or fair education? Who wouldn't? It's like saying that is killing right or wrong. We all know the answer to it. It's just, why don't we?
So historically, why did we have to fight?
Yeah.
It's so obvious.
Yeah.
Why did all of these social changes need to be fought for?
True. But wouldn't you say some of them actually fought for our liberty? Some of them actually fought for our freedom? Not all, but some.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's the Luddites or the Tolkien martyrs, but Britain, because it was the first industrialised nation, it's where the Industrial Revolution started.
Yeah.
The amount of poverty and the social upheaval, the rural depopulation, which is what has gone on in China in the last 3 decades.
Yeah.
It was an awful place to live, and so there was a lot of social unrest in order to win the human rights, is what we call most of them. Not even, having your kid go to school to 16 is basic.
Like basic human rights.
Rights.
Yeah.
Not to stand, not to have, children living in orphanages that were being worked 16 hours a day and then being fed porridge like Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Charles Dickens was not only, he was a fictional writer. It was documentary. He was describing the scene at the time, the way of life. And, so that's why Britain is the mother of democracies, because it grew so quickly, had such rapid social change, and people died for it. To create that social change, to create that parliamentary system, to create that judicial system.
And is that is that the word I brought up earlier called sacrifice? Would you use that word?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Mm.
I mean, how many people sacrificed their lives in the First and Second World War to fight for democracy and freedom?
Yeah. Mm. It's interesting. Yeah. All right, Brian. Well, I think we've covered everything that I want to discuss today, and it was really good having you on the show. And thank you for being here. Thank you for having a conversation with me. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Take care.